I don't know if you've heard the stats that the government suffers a crisis. We're not getting younger generations in. Those lower grade levels, there's a lot of vacancies there. And I believe that that's happening is because we haven't put the fire in anybody's belly about what the government does. Because, I never talked about writing contracts. When I went out to recruit people, I did not say, oh, I write contracts for a living. Because that's boring. I said, I enable mission. I protect the homeland. I am a part of a team of people that make sure that 9/11 doesn't happen. That's what I do. When I worked at NASA, I talked about space exploration. When I worked at Navy, I talked about salvage and diving, going in and recovering wreckage from the water. I talked about the Space Shuttle Challenger recovery. Those are the things you talk about. I'm not talking about writing a contract. That was boring. It's about enabling mission. All of us come together to deliver services to the citizen, to make sure that we protect and we provide services to the people who live in this country, the people who visit this country, who come and study in this country. That's what makes us a great country, because we have a government that actually really cares about it.
I'm Rachel Coble.
And I'm Liz Dean.
Welcome to Mock It. This podcast interviews industry experts from AI innovators to UX architects to nonprofit leaders and lots of people in between.
We explore the back of the napkin ideas that impact the nation, so you don't have to dig for the discoveries yourself. Enjoy and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Hey everyone, we are back for season 5 of Mock It, which I can't believe. This season, we are starting out with a very special guest, Soraya Correa. She has a breadth of experience and so many good stories. There are lots of good nuggets that you're going to want to print out and hang on your manifest board, vision board, whatever board you have. It's a really great episode and we really hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, for anyone looking for leadership tips, want to get involved with being a government employee or nonprofits or contracting, just like
procurement.
Rachel. Yeah, we really covered a lot, like Rachel said. It was a really great episode. We hope you enjoy it. So please remember to like, subscribe, and watch us on where you watch your podcasts. Welcome to season 5. Yeah, so you got your undergrad from AU in procurement and acquisitions.
Right.
So that is very, very specific.
Yes.
How did you know that you wanted to go into procurement? Was it, I'm going to steal your phrase. Yeah.
I was like, was this a freshman year decision? Was it a junior year decision? Did you graduate high school or whenever you went to college and be like, procurement, that is what I would like to do?
So there you go, thinking that I was intentional about this.
I was like, wow, she knew exactly what she wanted to do.
No, not quite. So I started out going to Northern Virginia Community College and I was working. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do, to tell you the truth.
That makes me feel so much better.
I wasn't too thrilled with college. It was okay, but it wasn't my thing. I wanted to work. And my father, who had been in government for 30 plus years at the time, recommended that I apply for a government job, get a clerk typist job, and that'll let you think what you're doing and you can go to school at night. So I took a government job. I went to work in a construction contracting office at Public Building Service, GSA, and that kind of influenced me. And I started going to school at night, and I found this curriculum at AU.
Got it.
That was this undergrad certificate in procurement. And so I said, well, what the heck, I'll do that because it's kind of tied to this career field, and we'll see what happens. So little did I know I'd get the bug. I actually enjoyed school. I enjoyed that curriculum. I really did. And I liked the work because it had a lot of, references to that legal side of the business, which I actually enjoyed, the interpretational part. And I really liked the instructors, the curriculum. And I just loved everything I was learning. And then I started applying for other contracting jobs. And I ended up working for the Naval Sea Systems Command as a contract specialist in a program office. And I credit that position, it was Office of Navy Diving and Salvage, and I credit that position with my passion for mission. Once I walked into that office and started really working there and understanding what they did and the service that we provide when we talk about government, the federal government, the different things that we do, that brought in my passion for mission. And that's kind of what made me a career government person who continued to excel. But none of my decisions were ever intentional. They were kind of like, oh, there's something over there. Let me raise my hand and try that. Oh, there's something over there. Let me try that. So I kind of, when people talk about charting their career path, I always go, careful that you don't chart it too much, because you want to see all the options. And that's what I did. And that's why I moved around and changed jobs quite a bit. But yeah, I wasn't that intentional about AU. It was just a cool thing to do.
Oh, I love that. I like that you brought up that you changed jobs a lot, because I feel like, especially when I was graduating and my first job was in recruitment, they almost looked down on people who had a bunch of different jobs. What's your advice for that? Are you like, don't listen to them, do what you want? Or is there like a pro con that you ever thought of changing jobs?
So you don't want to change jobs just for the sake of changing jobs, right? You want to be a little bit more thoughtful about it. But I do think that it's good, especially in your early career, to explore opportunities. And so the way I viewed it was changing like about every 2 years was normal. If you change every year, people start to question it. But I think every 2 years is reasonable, especially when you're moving on to something new and or growing or advancing. And when I talk about growing and advancing, it doesn't mean it has to be a promotion. It just has to be something more challenging, something that teaches you something new. I'm a person that thrives on learning. I'm always looking for that next opportunity to learn or to do something that is of value to me that helps me grow as a person. And so I always advise folks, probably about 2 years, as you start to climb up and you go into those leadership jobs, now you start thinking 3 to 5 years. But that's a good target. I think more than 5 years, you might start to get stale in a position, especially in the senior leadership roles. So as I say that, I was the DHS Chief Procurement Officer for 6.5 years, but there was COVID there. So I stuck around to get through COVID. Yeah. But I actually, when I was leaving and people were, why are you leaving? I said, because I've been here like a year and a half longer than I planned, right? Because I always believe that 3 to 5 years is like a happy balance. 3, because you got to have some time to get things done, especially when you're in those senior executive roles. 5 years, because you're probably going to get stale after that, and you want to create opportunities for others. So that's my view of the world. That's my philosophy.
Exciting. I like that philosophy. So we know that you were at DHS and then you kind of left for a bit. What made you want to get back into starting almost another career path?
So I spent 40 years in government, and I moved around. I worked at different agencies and decided to retire from DHS after almost 41 years of service, because I felt it was time. Another philosophy that I always share with people is leave when your game is good. When people want you to stay, when your numbers are good and people are sharing accolades, that's the time to leave. Do not wait for people going, time to go. Because that's no bueno. Anyway, but I left, and I still had a fire in my belly. I still have a fire in my belly about doing things and hopefully helping others think of a better way of doing things. And so when I left DHS after about 2 months, I decided to come back into the workforce. And I started out as an independent consultant that went to work for the National Contract Management Association. And I was perfectly happy at NCMA, great organization. I was working at the Contract Management Institute. And then the phone rang, and it was a recruiter looking for the next CEO and president of the National Industries for the Blind. And just reading up on that mission to help people who are blind or visually impaired to find jobs, because that's what we do. We create jobs for those individuals. I just couldn't resist the mission. I really couldn't. I said, oh boy, I'm going to take on a really heavy duty job, a lot of responsibility, which I'm not scared of. But it's that mission. It just called me. It's like a calling. And so I'm excited to be there and helping people and learning so much about this environment for people with disabilities, but primarily those who are blind or visually impaired. But very excited to be supporting them and helping them out. I started March 18th.
Oh my gosh. So new and fresh and like exciting.
But it was all about, I still have energy and enthusiasm. And I think along the way, I've learned a lot about being a leader and what makes a good leader and what doesn't. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but I'm saying that I've learned a lot that I can pass on to others. And as long as I have that opportunity to go in and help an organization transform and change and get better and maybe influence the next cadre of leaderships, then I want to do that. I don't want to stand up and just lecture about it, right? I want to show it. I want to demonstrate it. So that's probably why I'm still there, and I'll probably still be doing this stuff for another 20. I did tell them I'm not going to be there for 40 years. I said, rest easy, you won't have me for 40.
They're probably like, dang it. Thought we were getting you for the long haul.
Or they're going,
I doubt it.
So you've taken on a lot of roles that are kind of trial by fire. Like procurement, you learn when you're in the pit, like doing the work. And now you've taken on a lot of leadership roles throughout your career. Now you're doing a whole new sort of second career. What advice do you have for people that, like, don't be scared to do a trial by fire role?
Sure. So what I always advise people, I do a lot of mentoring. And what I always advise people is think about your skill sets. Don't focus on the job or the title of the job. Think about what skills it takes. And I'm going to give you a couple examples. So mid-career, I left procurement and went into IT. Completely different role as a program manager, helping develop IT requirements, and then helping form the strategy for our contracts, but not actually writing the contracts. So you can imagine I was biting my nails right the whole time. But the advice I always give people is study your skills. When I considered that move, and it was a call that I got offering me this position to come into IT at Immigration and Naturalization Service, I was perfectly comfortable at NASA as a senior level contracting officer, had a great career there, but just my curiosity, number one, to go into the IT field, but thinking about the skills. Good analyst, good writing skills, good communication, right? Those are the things that you have to think about. A lot of times we focus on the title of the position. Would I be a good program manager? I studied the skills and I said, you know what? I probably could do okay. I'm going to have to learn, right? I'm going to have to learn a new terminology and a new approach and all those good, but that's okay. That's cool. I'm going to learn something, right? But it was the skills. I said, I have transferable skills. And I can take what I've done in procurement and what I know about procurement and bring it over into this side of the equation. And that's literally what I did. And so I spent the next 10 years in IT. And what I did was gain an appreciation for the complexities of IT and the complexities of implementing technology. And I think it made me a better contracting professional when I came back into this business because I really understood a customer and how a customer thinks, how they act, how they react, so I could apply that to my job. And then I came back into procurement when we became the Department of Homeland Security. I was at INS, and I was part of the folks that rolled in on day one to stand up the agency. And in that role as head of contracting, I started thinking about how do I get people to think better in procurement? Because now I've been the customer, and I've heard how we speak to customers. So I started working on that. You started seeing me trying to evolve a culture that was more about service and looking at our program managers, our program officials that we worked with as customers. I later would go back out of procurement to go work for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, part of DHS, to run their management organization. And a year later, I would end up running one of their major directorates, doing records management and their employment verification systems.
Oh, nice.
And then that's where I got the call to become the chief procurement officer. So that movement back and forth gave me an experience of being on one side of the table and then being on the other. And I think that's important. And what I tell people is don't be afraid to try something new. Just think it through and think about what your skill sets are that you bring to that job, but also think about what you're going to learn in that new role and how you can take that back to your old role or on to the next one. But don't be afraid to take chances. Just think about those risks. Think about you personally, your education, your background. Mm-hmm. Think about your family, because your family plays a role in every decision that you make, right? But think about your family and your work environment and what that means to you. And if it's right for you, take it. And if it isn't, don't feel bad, but no regrets. I never, in my entire career, I can honestly tell you I have no regrets. Everything that I did, I would do it all over again.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I have no regrets. Some of the jobs were really hard, and I worked for a few people that but I also learned. I mean, I got along with every boss I had. I had great, honest relationships with those bosses, even if I didn't think the world of them. But believe it or not, didn't really have bad bosses because I chose not to let them be bad bosses.
Oh, can we get some advice on that? So I'm MetroStar, I've had all wonderful bosses. Same. In my earlier career,
same.
I have had we had some
interesting some heart to heart on this.
Yeah.
It's all about your optimism. I chose not to let people get to me. I chose to remain positive. That doesn't mean that I don't lose my temper and all that good stuff. I do. But I also chose to not let things bother me. I had a 48-hour rule. I actually share this with people quite a bit. My 48-hour rule, whatever disappointed you, get over it in 48 hours because you can't change it. It already happened.
You're a good person.
Happened, right? And here's the other thing. If you let those disappointments stay with you, you start to wear them. They start to show as chips on your shoulder and your attitude. So I chose not to do that. And I chose to instead go home, kick over a chair, have a drink, whatever disappointed you, get over it and move on. Move on to the next thing. So if you didn't get that job you wanted, my view of the world was, didn't get the job I wanted. Okay. Not happy, but okay. I'm either going to stick around and make you regret not picking me because that other person's not going to be as good as me, or I'll just move on. It's okay. Right? I'm not entitled to the job. I have an opportunity to get a job. You're entitled to pick whoever you want. I don't care. Once you pick, right? And sometimes I did stick around and I ended up in a better place. Or sometimes I moved on and I ended up in a better place. But I think a lot of that had to do with my attitude and my optimism, my desire to say, I'm not going to let you get to me. And as a result, I spent 40 years in federal service and I never really had any negatives with any of my bosses. I didn't file any complaints or anything like that. And I had a great career. And the next job led to the next job, which was better. And along the way, even when I suffered disappointments, sometimes people came back and said, God, I regret not having kept you in the organization.
Oh, that has to feel so good.
It's the nicest compliment you can get. But it wasn't because of just my talent. It was because of my attitude, my willingness to work hard. And I believe that a lot of that came from being a woman and being a woman of color. I had to prove myself probably a little bit more than others. Also, I got my degree later in life. So I had to prove myself a little bit more. But I persevered and it was good. And I keep a smile on my face and people don't know if I'm smiling because I'm nuts or because I'm happy, right? It's okay. Either one works. They leave you alone.
That's true.
You're a huge advocate for risk and failure, and you seem so confident. I mean, you're like oozing like this, like
I
full
need
confidence.
this confidence.
Yeah. Do you have like any words of wisdom for being able to accept risk and failure as just part of life, not part of a job?
Sure. So my ability to accept risk and failure came from how I managed my career, that I did take risks and that there were times that those risks didn't pan out. It wasn't really what I wanted, but it was okay. I just dusted myself off and I took the lessons learned. And that is the biggest thing that I tell folks about failure. If you fail because you're trying something new, trying something different, that's a learning opportunity. If you fail because you're just lazy or don't work hard at it, that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
And what I tell leaders is you got to let people take risks. If you want to change the dynamics of your organization, if you want to improve your operations, if you want to create greater opportunities, then you got to let people bring you ideas. And ideas don't usually come from the top. I'm a person that always has a lot of ideas. That's all they are, ideas. I throw them on the table and I go, now go talk to the people that make stuff happen. The people who do the day-to-day work, and ask them what works for them. Ask them how would they change the world? What would they do differently in their job? And from there, we can pull those pearls of nuggets and we can try some things. And sometimes we're going to be really successful and it's going to go great and everybody's going to be happy. And sometimes we're going to fail. And if there is a failure, then that's on leadership. That's me. I own that failure. But you're going to learn from that failure and you're going to have the opportunity to go out and give people lessons learned from that failure. And that's what successful people will say. Anybody who's successful, read any book. You know, I'm a big fan of many of our former political leaders, as well as people in government and in other areas. Almost every person that has ever been successful talks about the failures that they encountered, the many times that they had to try something and they had to get up and dust themselves off. So it's okay to take risks. Just know what your risks are. And understand those risks and have a plan. I used to joke around all the time, and I still do with my staff. I was go, okay, we got plan A down. Now what's plan B? Because something's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
Yes, we better have a plan B. How are we going to get ourselves out? And where can we afford to take the most risk? And where do we have to be careful with the rest, right? Because you have to weigh the value of those risks and whether or not you could fail. And if you fail, how are you going to recover from it? You have to think about those things.
Oh, that's good to think about how you're going to recover from the failure.
How you're gonna recover from
I feel like a lot of people don't like to think about that when they're trying something because they're like, oh, I'm not going to fail. I was like, well, you might.
And one of the things I do tell leaders is don't think about yourself when you think about your organization and your people, right? How are they going to be impacted by the risk? In the times that we confronted failure as an organization, how you react as a leader is extremely important. And I always tried to stay positive. Even if it was painful, I might say, wow, that one's going to kick us in the butt. Here's what we learned. Here are the lessons learned. So here's how we're going to go out and fix it. And then let's talk about what we make sure that this doesn't happen again. But keep it positive, because in that moment, you can either gain advocates or lose them forever. How you treat your people in a moment of failure is extremely important. In a moment of crisis, that's where leadership shines. Leadership doesn't shine when things are going good. You just sound good when things are going good, right? No, leadership shines in those moments of failure, in those moments of crisis when people need you the most. And how you make people feel in those moments is what they're going to remember forever. And the best words that I ever got, and I still get a little emotional about this, I had a contracting officer who almost had a nervous breakdown. She was working on a project so intensely, and I chose to cancel the project because I said, there's no recovery from this, and all you're doing is killing yourself. And that's not what I need. And I always remember that when she talked about that, the first thing she said was, wow, my boss canceled this project and then gave me a cash award for the great work that I did. Oh. Because she understood that we couldn't recover it, and she was willing to take that in the nose for us. Those are the best words you can have. And that's a loyal employee for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's what you work for. You know, a lot of times folks get into leadership roles and they forget what it's all about. Leadership is about the people that you have. It's not about you anymore. And that's what I tell folks. When you get in that leadership, it's never about me. It's about the organization. I'm going to get my accolades if I have a great organization, if I have great people. And the greatest accolade comes from your staff. It really does, right? I go every day, and when people say, thank you, Soraya, I really appreciate that you talked about this or you did that, that's where I get my accolades from. That leadership likes me, it's great. That's nice. But it's those folks that I work for. I am a servant leader. I'm there to take care of the team.
Did you have a leader, a mentor that helped you with this kind of thought process, or did it just come naturally to you?
So I did. I didn't know they were a mentor. I always joke around about that when I started my career, I probably had several mentors. I just didn't know. My greatest mentor always will be my father.
Oh,
because my father.
You made me cry.
Yeah, I'm going to cry. But my father was the greatest influence in my life in terms of how he conducted himself, the values that he instilled in me from a work standpoint. My mother as well. Both of them raised my brother and I. You do the best job possible. You take care of people. Mm-hmm. That was something that was instilled in us. You know, if you have more than the next person, then you give to that person. But you always help others. And that has stayed with me all my life and all my career. But I did meet some great people in government. Some of my first bosses were like my best mentors, and they're still friends today. And I learned from as much from them as being good leaders, as well as from some of the leaders that I didn't think were so great. Yeah. Because I did learn from them. Don't do that. Or, you know, got to tweak that approach. It's not good to be that way. And I'm not going to tell you that I was always good at what I did. I learned along the way, and I stubbed my toe a couple of times and made mistakes. What I did learn was to go back and apologize for those mistakes, to sometimes go to employees and say, you know what, I didn't handle that one real well. Let's fix that. Or to acknowledge my weaknesses, right? To understand and reflect upon my own weaknesses. And that's the other thing that I always tell folks who are aspiring to be leaders. Know yourself for a while. Know what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, so that you can capitalize on your strengths and take care of those weaknesses, either through how you behave or how you bring in people to support you to take care of those weaknesses. So I'll share one of my biggest weaknesses, delegation. I was horrible.
Oh my God, I'm so bad at that too. I was just thinking that.
I'm horrible at it. And I'm probably still not good at it because I still have to think about it. But I learned to not immediately jump in to do the task.
And I had that's what I do.
And I had an employee who actually said to me, Have you ever noticed that when I bring in a document for you to review, you always pick up a pen right away? You know what? I never noticed that. So I consciously made it a point to teach myself not to do that, because I would jump in and edit, and I started learning how to say, is it good enough?
Yes.
Does it have to have my touch on it, or is this really good enough, right? And some things are good enough and some things need a touch, right? They need a change in tone or whatever. The other thing I also taught myself in the delegation game was to make sure that I always explain to people why I changed something, or why I felt that I needed to be involved in it, so that they could understand why I wasn't delegating. Because sometimes people assume you don't trust them.
Yeah.
That's the key word. They think you don't trust them. And I did trust my employees. It was just sometimes I felt there's landmines here that I should navigate with you, right?
Yeah.
But I have to tell them that, because if I don't tell them that, then they don't know that. So, yeah. So my advice is know your strengths, know your weaknesses, know yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And always reflect on yourself. I used to joke around, I used to commute to DC every day in the mornings and in the evenings, right? But I used my mornings to think about the day ahead, what I was needed to do, that kind of stuff. But you know what I used my evenings for? To reflect on the day. To think about the meetings that I was in and how the discussions went. And to think about, did that go the way I wanted it to go? Or could I have done something differently, right? Should I have done something differently? And by doing that, number one, I got my lessons learned. But number two, it gave me an opportunity to go back the next day and correct something if I really needed to correct it. And I will tell you that I often tell folks, when you're reflecting, the importance of reflecting is about the lesson that you learn about yourself. Because here's the one thing that I've learned in life, and you read this, people get paid a lot of money to come up with this stuff. I come up with it and throw it out.
You should write a book and easily make money.
Exactly, make all that money, right? But you don't change other people. You change how they react to you by how you change yourself. And so if I want a different reaction from someone, then I've got to change how I approach them, or how I say things, or how I do things. And so that's the reason for reflecting, is to think about, if I didn't get the outcome that I wanted in that meeting, could I have done or said something differently? One of my many great bosses used to keep a mirror on his desk. And I've always had a good relationship with my bosses. And I went to him and I said, okay, tell me that you're not that vain. That you have to look at yourself all the time. And he said, no, take a look at my mirror. And he had a little note at the bottom of the mirror. It says, for each problem, look here. Meaning, look at yourself. So always reflect first on you. Are you a part of that problem? Could you do something differently to avoid that problem? And that's like great advice.
Yeah.
That was great advice. I still don't keep the mirror on my desk. But I do look at myself first when something doesn't go well, to say, could I have done something differently? Could I have influenced that outcome? And then also when you're looking at things that go wrong, first fix the problem. Focus on the problem, not who did what.
The blame game, yeah.
Yeah, don't play blame game. But I never play blame game, because it
never ends well.
Yeah, it never ends well, right?
Never.
But lessons learned, very important. Let's go sit down, hot wash it, and figure out how we make sure that this doesn't happen again, or that we're prepared for it if it can happen again.
Oh, I feel like you would love to be in a UX career, because I feel like that's everything you do. You like to look at who we're affecting, then you like to do the reflection, which what's that called in UX?
The retrospective.
Yeah, I was like, so maybe after you're done with your current role, you can
the next career, right?
get a little
but
into
I built
UX.
a career on customer service.
Yeah.
In other words, when I talk about procurement, or even IT, or even being a leader, it's about customer service.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in my ecosystem is a customer. My employees are my customer. My bosses are my customers. My peers, and even those people externally that I talk to are customers. And if you think in that manner, then you're apt to provide better service, right? When I say my employees are my customer, what I mean by that is when they come to me for guidance, direction, whatever it is, I'm providing a service to them. And so I have to provide the best possible service. And if I think of them as a customer, I'm going to do that. If I think of them as a boss, I might not.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Similar with my peers and similar with my bosses. Some bosses, you don't want to think of them as your customer, but you should, right? Yeah. But if I think of them as customers, then I'm going to provide my best. At least I'd like to think that. And if I'm providing my best, then they'll appreciate that, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what we really need to think. When we think of ourselves as an ecosystem of customers and suppliers, then that changes the nature of the relationship. And I do put myself in customer shoes because I've been there. I've been the customer of the services I provide.
Oh, I was okay. I was going to say, when you're thinking that way, do you have any advice for, like, how do you learn more about customers if you're not doing that job yourself? Like, how did you go about that? Were you going to industry events, just asking, getting on calls?
You ask, you try to participate in their activities. People love to tell you what they do. People care about what they do. And they
hopefully
love
they
to share with you. Right. So you go and you talk to them. When I started out my procurement career, one of the reasons I believe I was successful as a contract specialist and contracting officer is because I sat down and talked to my customers, and I would say, why is this important? What do you need this for? How does this work? Can I see this somewhere? And I would go to them and visit them and sit down with them and talk to them and not quote federal acquisition regulations. That was my responsibility, but help them understand their options for getting something done and put it in a way that it was in context to them, what they cared about, the deadline that they had to meet, the limits of their budget, whatever it was. I tried to make sure that I understood what was important to them, why it mattered, and how I could help them achieve that outcome. Even today, as a CEO, my first order of business, I've been going around visiting the different conferences and events that our nonprofit agencies attend. NIB, National Industries for the Blind, is a network of nonprofit agencies. Mm-hmm. I'm visiting these nonprofit agencies and talking to the chief executive officers at those agencies to better understand what they do, how they do it, why they do it, and what are the issues affecting them, so that I can understand how I position myself to help them, right? So I always tell people that, go learn it. And I often hear in government, well, I'm really busy, my workload. It's true. Contracting officers have some of the worst workloads that I've ever seen. I will defend them always because we keep piling work on them, but we don't add the people. We don't distribute the function enough. We have people and we just keep adding to their responsibility. And then people say, well, they're processing the same number of transactions, but with greater responsibility. That means less time to do that transaction. That said, they say they're busy, but are you too busy to have to go back and rework because you didn't get something done in the beginning? That's what you got to think about. I think about efficiency in working. If I can learn as much as I can up front and apply it through the process is probably going to go better. Whereas if I rush to get it done and then I find out something at the end, I might have to go back and redo it. That's kind of the way I've always thought in that efficiency mode. So I invest that time up front, and I do think it's not as much of an investment as it will be for the pain that I'm going to suffer in the end of the process if I don't get it right.
And then it's frustrating to go back.
And frustrating to go back. And you don't build the relationship. One of the things I tell people, everything that we do is all about relationships. You build those relationships with people. You learn to communicate with people. You don't want to build that relationship when you got to go deliver bad news. Yeah. It's like nothing worse than going, hi, I'm Soraya, and I'm here to tell you your procurement just went downhill. No, that's not going to work, right? It's better to have that relationship built and have those conversations along the way and build that trust. Because when you have to deliver that bad news, it's going to take it a little bit better because you have that relationship.
Oh, I would hate being the person to deliver bad news.
It goes with the territory.
I know. Oh, stresses me out.
So you've worked with a ton of big budgets. How do you block out that fear and stress of,
it's a lot of money.
Yeah, and it's taxpayer money, and like we talked about risk and failure, and like how do you sort of like get through that with wanting to be successful, but then also having these outside factors of, you don't want to waste taxpayer money. You want to make sure you're the leadership that, you're being a good customer to your leadership, like we're just talking about.
Well, you play by the rules. First of all, there's a lot of rules surrounding all these big.
Oh, yeah, there are.
So you play by the rules, but you have experts there to advise you, right? You have a great CFO and you have great budget directors and people in your organization that know the rules. But the biggest thing and the advice that I used to always give folks is make sure that you make the right decision for the right reason. And that if you make the wrong decision, you still did it for the right reason. Yeah. Don't line your pockets, right? We're not here for our self-aggrandizement. Mm-hmm. We are here to serve the public. And the public is trusting us. The taxpayer is trusting us with their hard-earned money. We have to make good decisions. That doesn't mean they're always going to be perfectly correct, but make sure you made that decision for the right reasons. And if you do that, you're probably going to get through the process all right. I'm not an expert in the budget process. I just understand it enough to keep myself out of trouble. I asked the right questions of the right people with the expertise, and I relied on those experts to get it right. That doesn't mean I didn't check them. I did, but I relied on them to take care of the intricacies and to come in and help me understand it. It's about honesty and integrity. It really is at the end of the day. And the other thing is, and I used to say this to government folks all the time, remember, you're a taxpayer. And if you're not, get out.
That should be on a t-shirt.
Right? But no, I used to say that all the time. I used to go, this is my money I'm messing with here.
Yeah.
So I have to get it right. Now, unfortunately, the stories that get told are the bad stories. Nobody tells the good stories.
Yeah.
Government does a lot of really good things. And a lot of decisions are wise. What you hear is that one bad decision that happened, or that one bad person that lined their pockets. I will tell you that in my career, probably 99% of the people that I worked with, the organizations that I was in, were doing a phenomenal job. It's just the story doesn't get told. Because if it bleeds, it leads, right? Isn't that the going phrase?
Not as exciting to write about happy stuff.
No. So, but it takes government officials, and I say this all the time, and I still say this when I talk in groups and stuff, we got to get out and tell the story. You got to get out and tell the good stories. And that's one of the things that I did in my career at DHS. I was always out there. That's why there's so many clips of me out there, because I was out there always trying to tell the story, talk about the great things that we were doing, why we were doing things differently, how we were trying to advance the mission, how we were trying to help the mission, enable the mission and help people get the mission done, how we tried to recruit people, right? Because, I don't know if you've heard the stats that the government suffers a crisis. We're not getting younger generations in. Those lower grade levels, there's a lot of vacancies there. And I believe that that's happening is because we haven't put the fire in anybody's belly about what the government does. Because, I never talked about writing contracts. When I went out to recruit people, I did not say, oh, I write contracts for a living. That's boring. I said, I enable mission. I protect the homeland. I am a part of a team of people that make sure that 9/11 doesn't happen again. That's what I do. When I worked at NASA, I talked about space exploration.
Yeah.
When I worked at Navy, I talked about salvage and diving, going in and recovering wreckage from the water. I talked about the Space Shuttle Challenger recovery. Those are the things you talk about. I'm not talking about writing a contract. That's boring. It's about enabling mission. All of us come together to deliver services to the citizen, to make sure that we protect and we provide services to the people who live in this country, the people who visit this country, who come and study in this country. That's what makes us a great country, because we have a government that actually really cares about people. Forget parties. Both parties care, right? They just have different approaches to getting there, like we all do, right? But our government is a true democracy. It is a true republic, and we have to respect that, because go visit another country and see how that goes, right? And so we have to talk more about the mission of government, what we deliver, the services that we provide. Social Security. People get their Social Security checks on time no matter what happens. Think about that for a moment. Even IRS, which is the agency that everybody loves, but they're doing the right thing. They're collecting revenue and making sure that people aren't cheating in the process, hopefully, right? And then Homeland Security, near and dear to my heart. We can't let 9/11 happen again.
Yeah.
So we have to watch for that, right? This is our way of life that we're protecting. And so if we could be more passionate about what we do in government and stop some of that infighting, because that's what people see on the news, right?
Yeah.
Everybody reflects on all that stupidity. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say stupidity, but it is. That silliness that goes on, that lack of civility. By the way, in the senior executive service, it's not that civil.
I figured.
When you go into an agency, we get along. The career civil servants get along fine with the politicals. Doesn't matter what party. We really do. We get along because we know we have to make it work. We have to deliver on the mission of the agency. And if we could get that message across a little bit more, people might get enthused about coming to government.
Yeah, I feel a little bit scared when they watch like debates and the only stories that are about politics or DC or anything in the news is wow.
I went out looking for that newer talent. I'm not going to say younger because some of them are not really young. I'm an old word anyway. But anyway, no, but going for that newer talent. And we created a program at DHS, and we did a pilot of it, going out and getting seniors to come in and spend in their junior to senior year transition, come in and spend I think it was 600 hours part-time work to learn what procurement is.
Oh, that's
so that we could then recruit them into our intern program, because we had a 3-year intern program. We were successful. The first pilot, we had 5 people in the pilot. 4 of the 5 came to work for us in our intern program.
Nice.
Those are some good metrics.
The one that didn't come to us went to work for Morgan Stanley. When they came in and told me, I said, well, if I lost to Morgan Stanley, I'm going to laugh, right? But my point is, that's what we need to do. We need to bring them in and show them and tell the stories and have people go out and talk to them that speak with the passion and the fervor like I do. By the way, if I had to do it all again, I'd come back into the government. And the only reason I didn't stick around was because I said, got to create room for the new. And besides, I got to do something different now. Try something new. But I don't know that I wouldn't go back in if there was a call, right?
I feel like you might get a call.
Yeah, there's going to be a call.
Someone's going to listen to this podcast and be like, all right, we can dial her.
We need her. Right? But it is about that passion. It's about lighting that fire in our youth. And I think you got to go all the way back into the high school years, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And instill that sense. And I don't think you have to. I spent 40 years because that was normal for us. People don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Not really. And now it's a lot easier to go back and forth, right? And so I'm not saying come and spend your career here, but come spend 5 years, go out, do something else, come back. Great benefits. It's great organization to work with. Once you're in government, you can move around. It's easy to move around.
Yeah.
But it's all about duty. I mean, I didn't go in the military. I came into the federal service. And if I had to do it again, I'd come back into the federal service, or I'd go in the military because I want to serve my country.
I feel like I'm talking to my mom a little bit with this conversation. So my mom is also a lifelong government. She's SAS, is always go gov, go gov.
So not my parents.
Yeah, she had great career at OPM. Yeah. And same thing, everything you're talking about, getting along with the politicals, everything you're saying. And I'm like, but I'm going to stay on the MetroStar side or the contracting side.
But I'm going to get an American flag tattoo after this.
There you go. That's the way to go.
But I will say I work much closer with Mission Driven, a project that's very mission driven currently. And everything you're saying about mission driven is 100% true.
It ignites your passion.
Yeah.
Right? If you believe in it, you're going to work harder at it, especially if you're surrounded by people who are just as passionate as you. Oh my God, it's great. It's like infectious.
Liz, you're making me want to work on a contract. Don't tell my boss.
Don't tell Stephanie. No, I'm not being blamed for that.
Stephanie is somewhere no.
Rachel's boss is the team that everyone wants to be on. So the marketing team is very fun. So I'm not putting that out into the universe.
That's because we get to work with everyone.
There you go.
Yeah.
We get to be a part of lots of missions.
That's the phrase. See, the marketing's in right there.
There you go.
Yeah. That's always, I feel like whenever we're doing anything marketing, that's always the first thing we do too. Is if it's Navy or Homeland Security or Department of State or any of these places, it's you go onto their website and look up their mission.
Yes.
And so it's well, you got to know why they're doing what they're doing in order for you to talk to them.
Exactly. Well, and understanding the differences, right? Because the differences are subtle. I mean, we're all
very subtle.
To a service and mission, but there are differences. Even within DHS, when you look at the Department of Homeland Security and you look at the different departments, their missions are different, right? But they come together for one mission. But FEMA does what it does, Coast Guard does what it does, etc. By the way, National Industries for the Blind, where I'm at now, it's almost like that. When you, in fact, the catchphrase that they gave me when I first walked through there, they said, you got to go visit nonprofit agencies, or NPAs is what we call them. Because when you've seen one NPA, you've only seen one NPA. Oh. Because each one's very different. What they do, the products and services that they deliver, how they work with the industry, it's very different. And similarly, but they all come together for one major purpose, and that is to create employment opportunities for people who are blind or visually impaired. And I think that's just an incredible mission, right? And when you think about that one mission that unites us, when I worked at DHS, what I loved was going around visiting the different components and their different missions, whether it was Secret Service, FEMA, CBP, Customs and Border Protection, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and so on, just looking at all those different missions, but how they come together to deliver.
So with working with nonprofits, nonprofits, like you're saying, each have their own vibe, but there's also like, we're in the DC. Either we're government, you're a contractor, or you work nonprofit or academia. Like, there's really, like, those are 4 major buckets of the DC area.
Yes.
And so
everybody talks about it at dinner.
Yes, 100%. So nonprofits, it's very easy to get burnt out in that atmosphere. There's a lot of, everyone's very mission driven, but also, like we were talking about earlier, the way that you get the mission done can vary here and there. How do you sort of unite all of these different NPAs that you're talking about?
So in our case, we're united by the common mission of that work that we do. And we actually, so the National Industries for the Blind is part of what's called the Ability One program in the federal government. So the Ability One program is a government program that was established to enable people with disabilities, to help people find employment, people with disabilities. So we're the National Industries for the Blind. There's a companion organization called Source America that does all other disabilities. And we each have these nonprofit agencies, which are basically businesses. They are businesses. They do manufacturing. They provide services. Their predominant customer is typically the government, but they also reinvest in their own organization to provide rehabilitation services for folks who are blind or visually impaired, or for folks with other disabilities. So again, it's a mission focus. You got to have a passion. You got to have a love for helping others. To a person, the CEOs I've met, not all of them are blind or visually impaired. In fact, it's a percentage of them. There's a percentage of them. I say probably maybe 15% of them are blind or visually impaired, but they employ folks who are blind or visually impaired. Generally speaking, the average MPA probably has greater than 70%. Our ratio is supposed to be 75%. Let's say greater than 70%. My point is, you're taking care of people. And that's usually what people are doing in the nonprofit agencies. And so they're coming at it from a mission perspective. In our case, we're dealing mostly with the federal government, but we do commercial work. And we're constantly looking at how we diversify and how we expand opportunities so that we can create greater employment opportunities for folks who are blind and visually impaired in whatever career field they want to be in. And a lot of folks may start out in our manufacturing facilities. A lot of them, not all of them, may start there. They eventually grow into what we're going to call indirect positions, leadership, management. Some of them go on to become the chief executive officer of their very own organization.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
and
that's so cool.
And that's about helping people. And not most people that are in that nonprofit business, that's what they're really doing. And there's varying degrees of nonprofits. There are those that are nonprofits, that there are associations. There are those that are individual membership and so on. NCMA was an individual membership organization for the contracting profession. Started out for the contracting profession, expanded beyond that, and it's mostly acquisition professionals, which could include program management and the customers of procurement. But again, there to provide certification, learning opportunities, etc. So each of these nonprofits do different things. And one of the things I kind of got drawn into that nonprofit side of the business is because it is about helping others. It is about expanding capability.
It's a feel-good job.
I just like being in service of people.
Yeah.
But I still got to make a living, right? So,
yeah. That's probably the scariest part about nonprofit. Yeah. I feel like that's how you can convince younger people to go into government. Be like, you're still serving people, but you might make a little bit more.
So here's an interesting thing. When people talk about government, even nonprofits, yes, in certain circumstances and career fields, you might make more money. But you also, a lot of times we think about the cash check. We don't think about the benefits.
Yeah, that's what my mom always talks about.
Wow. Don't think about the benefits, like how much leave you earn versus how much you might earn in an organization that might be paying you more. The training, right? Some organizations aren't going to train you. You got to train yourself, right?
And some people can't handle that.
Exactly. And those are the kinds of things, and your health benefits, and like government has some of the best benefits that you can get. Now, you don't make as much. And I, there are people that try to say that you can't. No. A senior leader in government doesn't make anywhere near as much as a senior leader in the industry side.
Yeah.
But they get really good benefits.
Yeah.
They have very good perks that come with the job. Industry gives good perks, but I think government gives better works. And I think when you're in your junior formative years, a lot of agencies do tuition reimbursement.
Yes.
They give you your training, your certification. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there. But people don't talk about those things, right? They just talk about the comparison of the salary.
Yeah.
Do you have advice isn't the right word, but one of the reasons why I didn't go into government when I was like fresh out of college was it's hard to get into the government.
Mm-hmm.
That is just, I don't know if that's a rumor, if that's like reality. If someone hears that, they might not go into USA.
They get discouraged.
Yeah, exactly. How do you combat that?
So I think it has been difficult in the past. I think it is getting better. The government is very conscientious of that. And even I would say in the last 15 years, I've seen advancements in that area. One of the things that you run into when you talk about government is that they have to be fair in the hiring practices, and they have to give due consideration to all applicants that come in. And sometimes you get people that just throw, resumes at everything. Right?
Yeah.
And so you got to weed through that. And that's generally what takes really long. But if you can get a good targeted applicant pool, you can hire pretty quickly. I was pretty successful at hiring. I didn't have a lot of problems, but I worked very closely with our HR offices. And I worked at a time when we had a very creative and focused HR office that was constantly trying to find ways to expedite. And then we also measured ourselves. We actually laid down the metrics on each step, what it should take and what it was actually taking. And we actually published the scorecard. And let me tell you, you want to get something done, publish a scorecard. Because I would get my scorecard and go, okay, we got to do better than this. Come on, guys.
I love that.
But all kidding aside, it can be difficult to get in if you don't understand how to do it. But what I found is the government's gotten much better about recruiting in terms of career fairs, in terms of explaining how things go. If you go to most websites now, you can know exactly where to log on to get you to USA, but they actually will tell you what they have out there. So I think it's becoming easier and easier to do. Will it ever be really, really fast? Well, here's what I'm going to say. It's like when people say procurement's got to go faster. Procurements can go as fast or as slow as you need them to go. That's the reality. I can award $1 billion contract in one day. It'll be hard, but I can do it, and I'll probably get a lot of questions, but I could do it. Similarly, you can hire quickly. It's just there are a lot of rules to the process, and you want to follow the rules, and you want to make the right choices. And that sometimes means that you got to spend a little time to get it right. And the more applicants you got or the more contractors you got bidding, then it takes a little bit longer to go through that process. So you have to think about that. The more that you can target, right? Make it real clear, this is what I'm looking for, and hopefully get those outliers out, then the more likely you are to expedite the process. But there's rules, and that's what, again, makes our government good. We have rules.
I kind of like that there are rules.
Yeah,
right. It makes me feel a little better.
But it's to protect, right, the abilities. When we talk about women in hiring, let's talk about women. Let's talk about women because we are women, right? I want to know that I got a fair shake at that job. And how am I going to know that if they just pick the first name that they come along with, or they hire their buddy that they know, even though I'm more qualified? By going through this process where they really validate the qualifications and do the right thing, hopefully we can go through that. Now, I don't want to be a Pollyanna. That doesn't mean the process always works, okay? I'm just being honest. But there is a reason why things are a little bit slower, and it is because you're trying to follow a set of rules. And that's true for state and local governments too. They follow rules.
Yeah.
And by the way, big corporations. When people try to pretend that, if you work for company XYZ, the largest corporation that has 20,000 people, they say that, they got rules too.
I almost feel like it would be slower in corporations, especially on the marketing side of things. I'm always like, oh man, if I worked at a company with like 40,000 people, the amount of hoops I'd have to jump through just to tweet something.
But they have rules too because they're bureaucracies.
Yeah.
Right? The bigger you get, you got to build.
You're all trying
rules
to protect yourself.
Because you're trying to protect yourself, and you're trying to make sure that you're doing things right, following the rules. So, I always tell people careful because you're judging it without really understanding why the rules are there and what the rules are.
I love that. I would rather something be a little bit slower and done right than super fast, and then everyone go, whoopsie.
Okay, do over.
Yeah.
Do-overs are not.
Yeah.
I know this is crazy to say, but we are coming up on time. But I wanted to just ask one more question because I feel like we can't leave this conversation without asking this question. Only because at MetroStar, we have our MetroStar Innovation Lab, which you probably now know where I'm going with this. And I feel like we've been talking about an Innovation Lab a lot recently. And you kind of started an Innovation Lab with one person.
Yeah. Yep.
What can you walk us through what that process was like? What were your fears, hopes, the lessons you learned from that? I mean, we kind of got a sense of you're like, we'll risk it, but what was that like?
Yeah. So when I became the chief procurement officer at DHS, literally, I don't think I was on the job a month when I went to the head of my policy group and I said,
Love.
Yeah, this is awesome.
I said, I want to create a procurement innovation lab. And but they looked at me like I had a third eye in my forehead. And I said, I want us to create an environment where people can bring ideas on how we can improve the procurement process. I want to test those ideas. And here's how this is going to work. They test the idea. If it works, they get to go out and tell everybody what they did. It went wonderful. And if it doesn't work, then I'll take responsibility for it. But what I want us to do is create the opportunity for people to bring us the idea so we can flush out that idea, make sure it doesn't violate regulations, those kinds of things, and so that we can coordinate with all the other players on the team to get everybody on board on this idea, and then we'll experiment. And I said, the other parameter is that no idea is too big or too small. So it doesn't have to be an idea to boil the ocean. Because unfortunately, when you think about acquisition reform and you hear people talk about acquisition, they're always trying to boil the ocean.
Yeah.
I said, no, it could be a step in the process. It could be, how do we fix this little bottle cap versus how do we fix the whole bottle and put water in it, right? So, but let's open it up to the people who bang on the keyboard, people who do the job. That's who I'm really interested in. Managers can have ideas. They can put them on the table, not knocking that, but I want to hear from the staff. So what she did was gave me her most creative individual. She had a guy on her staff who was really, really good. And he was very creative and good at interpreting regulations. And he was one of those people that always wanted to find a way to do things better. And so when he came to me to talk about this, I said, so remember, you don't get to do the work. You get to help people. We are here to coach people, to teach them, to advise them. You're not going to do the work. They have to do it. And if somebody has an idea and they're not comfortable trying it out, we can give it to another team to try out. But we are not going to do the work here because that defeats the purpose. I want people to see what it feels like to take a risk and to take a chance and to have somebody believe in your idea and try it. So the first thing that we did was a business process thing where we were talking about contract closeouts, and we had a real backlog on closing out contracts. And I said, well, let's set up some rules and let's just do a mass closeout. And so that's what we did. We set up some process where we said, take all the fixed price orders that there's been no activity for more than 12 months, that we believe we've gotten all the final payments, and we identify them, and we're just going to, en masse, we're going to close them out.
Nice.
We're not going to go through the detailed checklist for every one of them. So we did that. It was like about 350. I think the number was like 350,000.
Oh,
and
man.
of course,
Talk about being not afraid of risk. Wow.
So this was just within DHS, right? And so what we said was, we're not going to tell you how to close it. We're just going to tell you that it's okay to close it. You could choose to run a spreadsheet, whatever you want to do, however you want to close it, right? So, but what we did do was say, here's what the process is going to be. Here are the parameters. And then we went out and greased the skids with the people that have something to say about it, including the GAO and IGs, and said, tell us what you think of this process that we're coming up with. Good idea. And when our legal counsel kind of hesitated with it and said,
it's always legal.
It's always the lawyers.
Well, there's supposed to be risk averse.
I'm married to a lawyer. That's all I'm thinking.
But when they said, I said, so what's your concern? They said, well, but what if something shouldn't be closed right away, right? I said, well, that's okay. When they point it out, we pull it off the list, and that goes through the regular process. But let's do that by exception. Let's not hold up everything else. So we did. We put out this thing. It was like 350,000. I think it was the number. And as I recall, maybe 5 came back as, hey, not sure they're ready to be closed. And that was my point. My point was sometimes we're following the rules and we're not thinking in the bigger picture. And that's what I was trying to get at. There's got to be a better way to skin the cat, right? I shouldn't say that way, right? That was terrible because I love cats and dogs. But anyway, so
I haven't heard that saying in such a long time.
Right? I'm an old timer. So anyway, So that started. That's how we started. And then I went to one of the agency CIOs, one of the CIOs within one of the components, who I knew was very creative. And I said to him, you've got this procurement coming up. If you were king for a day and you could devise the ideal approach to how you want to evaluate the technical proposals, what would you do? And he said, well, I would probably, this was about software code. So I'd probably give them some code with some errors in it and have a series of questions that they needed to answer and have come in and do a presentation and tell us how they found it. And I'd want the team that's going to, bid on the contract and work on the contract. But come in, do a kind of presentation, tell me how they found the errors, what they found, how they would fix it, blah, blah, blah. He said, so I could just hear the team in action, because I think if I hear them, if I talk to them, I'll know whether or not they really know what they're doing. I said, okay, let's try it. Literally, I said, let's try it. He said, think we can do this? Yeah. And we sat down with legal counsel and others, and we came up with an approach to do it where they didn't have to do the writing of, 50 or 100 pages to answer the question. We literally said, you give us a high level technical capabilities, like on your approach, and then we're going to bring you in. We're going to put you in a room. We're going to give you, I forget how many hours to look at this code and come up with the responses to the questions. And then you're going to come in a room and you're going to make a presentation. And in that room, we had our evaluation panel. We had the lawyer and the contracting officer. That was it. Right? And they were there and they heard, and there was a little bit of exchange, right? That we could ask follow-on questions, and then we documented everything. The folks left the room and we evaluated, I think it was 5 proposals in less than 4 weeks.
Wow.
Normally that could take 3 to 4 months, depending on the complexity and the back and forth with questions. And the most important thing that came out of that wasn't even the speed with which we did it. It was how the evaluators felt. They felt more confident in their selection because they better understood what the vendors were doing, how they were doing it, and who the players were, how they would interact with the government. That started what we call the don't tell me, show me. I think that's what we call it. Don't tell me, show me approach. Do a capability demonstration. Show me how you're going to do this work, as opposed to just giving me a long narrative. Because, by the way, once people give you the long narrative, you don't know who the hell wrote it.
Yeah.
That's why be a good author.
Well, that's why when people talk about, are you worried about AI writing proposal? I go, you don't know who writes a proposal now. So, just know how to evaluate the proposal, right? So, but that started that thinking through the evaluation factors, how we do the evaluations, what we ask for. The other thing we did on another procurement, we asked for YouTube videos. And we actually told companies, if you use a professional video, we're going to toss you out. Because we didn't want that. We wanted you to walk around with your little camera and talk to your teams. There were a lot of companies
our 80%
like
sweating.
Like, what? They didn't like that. A lot of companies did not like it, not being able to do like the more professional presentation. And we're like, no, because we don't want you to spend a lot of money. We want to tell you whether we think you're even in the ballpark. Should you be bidding? Doing that what they call advisory down select. So these are like some of the things that we kept coming up with. How we engage with industry in a pre-proposal conference. Typically, you're going to talk about the solicitation, what's in it, and you're kind of regurgitating what's already there. We took a different approach on one of our procurements where we invited industry in and we said, we're going to tell you about our requirement. We're going to introduce you to all the program offices that are out there. We're not going to talk about the solicitation. If you want to learn about small business, go to that table. If you want to learn about, clauses, go to that table. But we're not going to talk about that. And then we did like little 5-minute meet and greets where companies could come in and ask us questions. And we'd have a team of people there to answer questions. But a totally different approach, not related to the solicitation and before the solicitation went out. So we could talk about anything we wanted to, right? Because the solicitation's not out.
Following the rules.
Taking those approaches of opening the dialogue up a little bit and making it a little bit more conversational and listening to industry feedback. So a lot of our early innovations were, I don't know that they were innovations, but they were more creative ways of doing what we already did.
I say that's an innovation.
And I actually said that to folks. I said, let's not get literal on the term innovation. I don't want you to do something whacked out and crazy that's going to get us. I'm just trying to get you to use the flexibilities that are in our regulations, because there are a lot of flexibilities in there we're not using today because we choose to keep doing things the same way because that's comfortable and we don't get in trouble. Let's think outside the box. Let's think differently. Let's think about the customer. Let's think about the service. Let's think about how we make life better for both the government and the vendors that are bidding, so that we're not stuck in this, mired in this evaluation process. We can move on to delivering on the service, because that's ultimately what the ultimate objective is: get product and service in the hands of the people that do the job. So let's get it over there. Let's not spend it all over here. And that's where we were very successful, even how we did debriefings. And what happened was it took off. It took off all of a sudden. Wow. Yeah, I can do this way, and I can do this way. And people started really thinking about it. And what we did was we had the lab. We called it a lab. There was nobody running around with little white coats or anything. But we started recruiting people in, and we recruited, we had like 2 people that I brought on full time. And then what we did was volunteers, people coming in on detail assignments from the different organizations. But what took off quickly was permeating the organization. People started thinking about things, and they would tell us, I want to do this project. Then we would coach them through that. And then we would track the project. We would actually follow up with them on a weekly basis to say, how's it going? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? Do you need to course correct? And kept that conversation going. And what happened was it caught on, right? People started seeing, oh, well, that's working for them. Maybe I should try something, and maybe I can try something. Or I'll try that technique, but I would do it this way. And that's what I wanted. I wanted people to keep trying new things and keep making it better and making it better. And what we did was we hosted webinars on every new technique we came up. We hosted webinars where we had the program office, the legal counsel, and the contracting officer talk about the process, what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it, what they learned. Because you didn't have to like everything, right? Sometimes you get through it and you go, oh, I wouldn't do that again. Yeah. That's fair. That's okay. It's a good conversation. And then midway, I think after the first, that was like about a year and a half, we actually brought in GAO attorney to talk about the protests, because we had a couple of protests and we were successful, but to talk about why we were successful, what we did right. Because again, that's an important part of the process and people need to understand that. So the whole idea behind it was just get people thinking, get those creative juices flowing, and just keep the dialogue going and talk about what we did, publish what we did so others could capitalize on it. And one of the things that I was very good about was going out to the other agencies. So I used to talk to my counterparts all the time. I would go to the CAO Council, the Chief Acquisition Officers Council, that's hosted by the Office of Federal Procurement Policy. And I would lay those ideas on the table and say, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're going to try. Here's what we're going to do. And we created this thing called Periodic Table of Acquisition Innovations in partnership with the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, where we published these things and created sample documents. Very popular table. And now people are populating it all the time. The idea was just give people permission to try something different.
I love that.
I was going to ask, how did you balance having the authority to sort of run this, but also giving people the autonomy to do it? Yeah.
So in my career, and folks have to be careful with this one, but in my career, I learned early on that it's a lot easier to say, I'm sorry than mother may I. So I just kind of went off and did this. And then I said, oh, it's taken off. Let me go tell my boss what I did, since I'm going to be talking about it publicly. And it was interesting. He said, well, how'd you do this? And I said, well, I took it out of hide. I used my own resource. I'm not asking for a budget for this. Now, organizations ask for budgets for this, but I never asked for a budget. I just said, I've got an idea and I want to try something. And if it works, great. Then we can keep building on it. And I think now we have maybe, I haven't checked lately, but I think they have about 10 or 11 people in the Acquisition Innovation Lab in the Procurement Innovation Lab. But what we did as well was we got into the coaching business. We trained people. Wow. We provided training on a regular basis. We started a coaching program to coach other people to be innovators, right? To be coaches, to be coaches, training coaches to be coaches. But the other thing that we also did was along the way, we were publishing every year, kind of like a yearbook. And that's what we call it. We call it a yearbook because we didn't do things like normal people. We tried to do things outside the normal. So we did like a yearbook where we would tell the stories and talk about the stats and show how we were benefiting and what was going well and have little anecdotes. And we'd have voices from the top. For our webinar, we always had a voice from the top. So we would bring senior leaders in to give that 5-minute spiel about why innovation is important. why it mattered, why it was important to do these things. So it kept encouraging people. And then I was always out there, and early on, I had the opportunity to demonstrate failure. We had a $1.2 billion project that didn't go well, and I canceled it. And people were like freaking out, like, oh my God. I was at a webinar where I said, look, head attached to the neck, still here. We can do this, right? But it's all about how you lay down that project, who you talk to, you enlist people to be a part of the solution, and then you tell the story. And you keep telling the story, right? And what I did was I always kept people informed of what we were doing. I had good working relationships with folks. So when I canceled the project, were they happy with it? No. But my CIO stood right next to me along with my boss and said, yeah, this is the right decision. This is the right choice to cancel this project. And the interesting thing was we had awarded 13 contracts and we got stuck in protest hell, where they keep protesting.
Yeah.
And we were getting ready to go. We went through the second round of protests. And people were telling us to go take corrective action, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm not going through a third round. We're not doing this.
Yeah.
Because this is about strong arming me into more contracts. So we're just going to cancel. So interesting, you can look this up. 8 companies that had won the 12 or 13 contracts that we had awarded, who now were losing their contracts because we canceled.
Which is stressful, but...
Penned a letter to me.
Oh.
Thanking me for the innovation, encouraging us to continue doing it. Despite their being disappointed, not winning, they penned a letter to me, thanking us for doing innovation.
Oh, what a compliment.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what I said. I said, this is why you do it. Because there are people out there that get it, that we got to try something and we're going to be successful. And by the way, one of those companies still talks to me today. Every now and then they'll call me and they say, hey, what are you doing these days, man? Because they liked what we were doing. They liked that we were trying something new, that we were thinking about how do we make the process better and then working from within to make that process better. And they wanted to be a part of that, right? And so I always tell people, you'd be surprised where your benefactors come from, right? 8 companies. You can look it up. The letter's still out there. 8 companies.
Are you
right?
Googling after this?
Yeah. Go look it up. They actually, they wrote the letter. I was like totally taken aback because I was never expecting that. But that to me is the biggest compliment that you could get. That and having everyone who was a part of the process aligned with you on the decision. Because my CIO stood right next to me along with my boss and said, yep, we agree. We need to cancel this and we stand with her on this. And didn't have any issues, really did not have any issues at all. I mean, yeah, that I have to answer a few questions here and there. I did, but it wasn't a catastrophe. Yeah. People didn't come after me and say, what are you doing? Crazy, right? Yeah. So there were some people like, oh, I don't know if I would have done that. Well, yeah.
I feel like that's why I'm in charge.
But you're not in my shoes and you didn't see what was going on and why. And for me, it was about, I'm not going to let anybody strong arm my agency into making more contract awards. And that's what it felt like. That's what they felt that was the challenge. Yeah. And so that's why I always tell people, you got to have the courage of your convictions. I think leadership requires a certain level of courage and commitment to doing the right thing. And that's hard. It's not easy. And you got to find the right person that's willing to do that. I happened to be the right person at that time. That didn't make me perfect. That just meant I was the right person at the time, but I cared enough about it. And I still do. I still, when I watch the news and I listen and I hear people criticizing my old agency, I go, because y'all just don't know how this is done. You don't understand how this is. My husband laughs because he goes, I got to change the channel. She'll throw something in.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like I learned for once in my life. I'm like, maybe I'll go see what the proposal team is doing. This is kind of fun. I should have said that. Debbie, if you're listening to this, no.
I am not following Rachel on that. I will support you. I will not follow.
But this has been really great. I feel like I learned so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I'm really excited about government work right now.
You should write that book that Rachel was talking about.
But no, I thank you for the opportunity. It's a privilege. It's been a privilege to work for the government. And now it's a privilege to be on this side of the table, working with the nonprofit agencies to serve our government. Just always get a thrill of taking care of people and helping folks. And I certainly want to encourage people to come into government. We make our government better. Nobody's going to make our government better other than us. So.
You're a wonderful advocate for the industry.
Yeah.
All right, Liz, would you like to take it away with the end? I feel like you're very good at it.
Oh, yeah. So we want to thank you for being here, but also want to remind anyone who's listening to like, subscribe, and follow us on our socials. And Hope you got everything out of this podcast that we did. This was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.